Ontario is a great place to explore the War of 1812, especially as we commemorate its bicentenary, bringing you face to face with the men and women who first put Canada on the map. The man who emerged as Canada's first great hero was a soldier from Guernsey. General Isaac Brock was everything a military superstar should be: dashing, ambitious, inspiring. From the outbreak of the war in 1812, his aim was to stop the Americans in their tracks. The American plan was to invade Canada on 3 fronts: across the Detroit River into western Upper Canada, across the Niagara River, and up through New York against Montreal. In August, Brock struck first in the west, and at Detroit he scored an amazing victory when he forced American General William Hull to surrender 2,500 men without even a fight. The clincher was Brock's secret weapon: Indians. Nothing terrified the Americans like Indians. With their battle cries, bravery, and reputation for bloodthirstiness, American volunteers, in fear of losing their scalps, lost their bottle when it came to fighting the local tribes. Brock joined forces with one of the most extraordinary Indian leaders in North American history. He was a Shawnee warrior named Tecumseh, a man who recognized that if his people were to stand any chance against the waves of American settlers, they would have to unite with one another and with the British. In the pre-dawn gloom on October 13, 1812, the Americans launched the second of their invasions of Canada across the Niagara River at Queenston Heights. 600 troops crowded into 13 boats. The British battery on the heights blazes down on them, but the troops under Winfield Scott capture it. Brock gallops in from nearby Fort George, and without waiting for sufficient reinforcements, leads his men in a charge to retake the battery. He's fatally shot in the chest. More British forces arrive on the scene, this time accompanied by Indians, and after savage fighting, the British recapture the battery. Now, by this time, there are 1,200 Americans on this side of the river. But hearing the Indian war cries, 1,800 of their fellow Americans on the other side refuse to cross. The remaining Americans are trapped. They jump from the cliff to be dashed on the rocks or hang from the trees where they're picked off by Indians. The remainder, 1,000 in total, surrender. The invasion had been foiled, but Isaac Brock was dead. Today, there's a park at Queenston Heights, part of the Niagara Park's Heritage Trail, and you can do a self-guided walking tour of the battlefield. Dominating the landscape is a monument to Isaac Brock, Canada's first great hero, gazing across the river at the United States. Ironically, you have to look hard for any evidence of the key role played by Canada's First Nations. Their contribution is commemorated on this small plaque below Brock's grand monument. During the War of 1812, the Niagara Peninsula was the one place where the two hostile armies were within sight and sound of one another. And unlike everywhere else along the 1,000-mile US-Canadian border, the most prosperous farms and communities were on the Canadian side. One US officer said of the settlements on the American side, "This is very poor country, miserable roads, nothing to be had for love or money. The land opposite is very inviting. It looks well, and I understand they live very well." Nothing has changed. Niagara is the Garden of Canada, and the best way of appreciating it is from the air. A helicopter ride over Niagara taking in the stunning falls is a highlight of a visit here. You really get a sense of the richness of the land. Niagara is known as the Fruit Bowl, especially famous for its peaches.
What a beautiful piece of countryside, a patchwork of orchards, villages and farms, and in the last 40 years a new crop has turned the Niagara Peninsula into a hot destination with tourists interested in more than water. Stick with us, this is going to get better. There's no other helicopter ride in the world that starts with one of nature's great wonders, pumping over 200,000 cubic feet of water per second, and ends miraculously with wine. I've landed in a vineyard.
Wine growing in these parts goes back to the early 1800s, but for years all that was produced was cheap bulk table wine. It's only since the 1970s that quality Canadian wine has been produced, and at the forefront of that revolution was Inniskillin Wines. You may be surprised to learn that there are 79 wine producers in Niagara, that Inniskillin was the first and is still one of the foremost of the modern batch, founded in 1974.
The sun isn't shining and it's raining, but this is still my idea of heaven. Oh, by the way, if you wondered what happened to America's third invasion force in 1812, well, in November it set out for Montreal, but a skirmish at night turned into farce when the troops started shooting at one another in the dark, and the general decided to withdraw. The conquest of Canada, which the US had thought would be so easy, had turned into a disaster.